Welcome to the first and maybe last power rankings of this World Cup. I mean, this entire tournament is kind of all over the place in terms of scheduling. First round that is really a qualifier. Second round where some teams can finish 3 games when others haven't even played their second yet. I would like to say that we're going to make sense of all this mess in these power rankings, but that's not why I make power rankings. And also, I'll probably mess it up even more. Because the entire tournament is too short for us to even work out who the best team is going to be unless one team goes ballistic. And in some cases, we're just looking at 2 games. Like if New Zealand had lost to India, how different would their ranking be? But that's also why the power rankings are so fun. Normal rules apply. This isn't a points table, as in this case, it would appear to be impossible anyway, across the 2 groups. We're really trying to have a look at how each team is currently going based on who they've played and who they have to play and form and talent and injuries and all those sorts of things. Oh, also probably the due and who batted first. And I'd like to apologise, as always, in advance for having your team too low.
This is the last knock. When was the first knock? Don't know.
Destroyed the West Indies, barely noticed Bangladesh, and Australia were terrible. Their form looks just beautiful. Though there hasn't been much of it, as they've won their games so quick. They won't be tired after only 34.2 overs of batting. I don't know if being fresh is going to be a massive help later on in this tournament, but it's probably better to do it that way. But they have already played 3 games, and they've almost already booked a semi-final spot. And I'm not sure their batters have even started sweating yet. Jofra Archer is England's best T20 bowler, and he isn't here. Moeen Ali is a 6th bowler, and Adil Rashid hasn't cracked the IPL, and Chris Jordan is always on the verge of being dropped. Oh, not to mention that Chris Woakes wasn't even supposed to be here, and Tamal Mills even more so. But this attack has destroyed top orders and strangled after that. They've been incredible. They haven't looked as dominant as England, but they beat India easily enough and then kept their composure pretty well in the next 2 games, even if they were a little bit closer. The good news is that they've played their 3 toughest opponents already. If this wasn't Pakistan, you'd say they'd easily go 5-zip. Ideal T20 combination is 8 batting options and 6 bowling options. That is what this team is. From a box-ticking exercise, they do almost everything they need to. Like England, they have batted second in every game. Although one of those was Afghanistan's choice. But as their games have been a bit closer than England, I think it's probably played a bigger factor in Pakistan looking so good. We might know a little bit more about them when they bat first. But they've won 3 from 3. Afghanistan could be 3-0. They destroyed Scotland and were clinical against Namibia and probably should have beaten Pakistan, or at least could have. They've got closer than anyone else anyway. They're probably too high on this list as their 2 wins are against associates. But I thought they did so well against Pakistan and their team looked so threatening and none of the other teams looked that incredible. They already had the best spin attack in the tournament and they just added Hamid, who they apparently had cryogenically frozen for just such an occasion. They're out. Their attack is outstanding for these conditions. I love the fact that Afghanistan just keep batting first. I'm not sure I get it, especially with so many great spinners. But it's not about getting Afghanistan, is it? It's about strapping yourself in for the ride. I don't know how long this will last, but I'm going to enjoy it while it does. Putting a 1-1 team this high is a bit of a thing, I suppose, but they have played the 2 best teams in their group, and I thought they should have done better against Pakistan. And now they have the really easy part of their schedule. I suppose the fact that I've got them and Afghanistan next to each other is quite interesting because, of course, that is going to be the big game. I love that New Zealand came with a bunch of opening options and then just went, I don't know, we'll just get Daryl Mitchell to do it. And better yet, he's been really good at it. I still want to see Finn Allen and some of the other guys, but let's rejoice in the fact that a guy is opening at the World Cup after 300 professional innings without ever having done it before. New Zealand like to read pitches and play the conditions, and we saw that in the 2019 World Cup. Well, that seems to be how this tournament is going as well. They're a high intellect team, and that seems to be pretty important in what is a tough tournament to just bowl fast and slog big. They're fairly well suited to the way this tournament looks like it's heading. Snuck home against South Africa and beat very well and got smashed a bit in the mouth by England. They just look a bit of a mess. The talent is all there, but again, they're turning up and just hoping that it all works out for them. There's little they can do about the fact that they don't have all-rounders. Or maybe even the fact that for generations they've struggled to produce them. But while in ODI cricket they used to be able to cover over that fact, you wonder if Australia, or really any team, will be able to win a T20 tournament now and going into the future without a genuine all-rounder. And they're not particularly easy to find. Australian players don't play in the Big Bash. They don't play that many T20 games for Australia, and only a few of them are automatic IPL players. England, India and New Zealand seem to plan years in advance for these sorts of tournaments, Australia seem to start thinking about them as they get on the plane. They lost to Australia, but they almost stole that game. They beat the West Indies, but I didn't think they were actually that good in that game, and they snuck home against Sri Lanka. I kind of think they aren't that good, but they are 2-1. And they've had 2 very close games, so it's all a bit of a crapshoot with them. I am marking the England game as a loss already. Unless England lose a toss and fail with bat and ball, I just can't see how South Africa can beat them. So they are 2-1 in the same way that Australia was 2-0 before playing England. But they have Bangladesh before that, so if they win that, they should be 3-1 when they're hitting the England game at least. Shamsi, Maharaj, Nortje, Rabada, that's such a strong 4 bowlers. They're still using Pretorius for the death, and it's been working so far, and obviously Markram will have to steal a few overs to help. But they have the ability to keep totals low, which of course they will need because their batting is not that great. I honestly don't know where to put India at this stage. They haven't got a win, and yet I'm still ranking them quite high. They lost to Pakistan, but I do think the conditions played a big part in that. Can't really say that for the New Zealand game. They have batted first in both games, but again, can't blame the New Zealand one on that. They look timid, tired, and are one Rashid Khan spell away from going home. And they might go home anyway. The top order is where their big guns sit, and they just haven't worked. It's only 2 games, and perhaps in the game against Pakistan, with the total that they got, they would have beaten a slightly worse team than Pakistan there. But with their batting, they almost always get good starts. And twice on the bounce they haven't. It could just be dumb luck, but what a time for it to happen. Hardik Pandya is bowling, and he got to face a few balls, albeit in a bit of a weird role. This means that, theoretically at least, the team is better now. But absolutely no Indian fan gives any shits about that right now. The England game was horrible. Really still think they should have beaten South Africa, and they did beat Bangladesh, who are lower than them on my rankings and in wins. The good news is that unlike South Africa and Sri Lanka, they've got their game against England out of the way. If they roll Sri Lanka, they might have an interesting game against Australia towards the end of this. But I think that Simmons innings may end up being why they go home early. There's little you can do about a bunch of your players losing form at the same time. In any T20 tournament, this is going to happen at one stage. And for all their problems, I think not having 3 batters in form for a single game is probably their biggest. They are older. Simmons did get stuck. They have batted first 3 times. They left Holder and the Ryan on the bench. Look, there's a lot of reasons they are where they are, but they're still going to be really disappointed with it. They came out of the first round with a lot of us thinking maybe they could steal a final spot in a weird group. They beat Bangladesh, and since then they've lost to Australia, and they should have really hung on against South Africa. They should be disappointed. They had a legitimate chance to qualify for the finals, and now they need to beat England to get to 3-2. Against the qualifying teams, they have been brutal. Against the better teams, they've lost twice. I don't know if it's that simple, but that's the record that they currently have. England is their next game, by the way. I do wonder how hard it is to be consistently good at T when your players don't have a high quality league at home. Well, until this year anyway. And also, a lot of the Sri Lankan players just don't play that much in the bigger leagues anymore. Possibly because they don't have a good league at home, again. Sri Lanka do play a lot of T20Is, but it's nothing like getting your players 10 to 15 games at home and then sending a lot of them to a bunch of overseas leagues. I really don't think with Sri Lanka that talent is the problem. Namibia beat Scotland and then they struggled against Afghanistan. Had they even held their own against Afghanistan? I might have even slipped them up the list a little bit, maybe just for fun, but that was a bad loss. That said, they're currently higher on the points table than India, so at the very least they should frame that. Namibia have the basics covered, they just don't really have the weapons. They play a style of T20 where they wait for you to do something really stupid and they capitalise it. At the higher level, that's a harder thing to do. I thought they bowled really well against Afghanistan, for instance, but there was no way they were ever going to be able to chase a total that high against an attack of that quality. 5 cricket clubs, that's the number of major cricket clubs that the Namibian team is picked from. We have to be realistic here. They have played very good cricket in this tournament, but this is still very early on in their journey. They're essentially a domestic team until very recently. We can't be too hard on them, but we also have to be quite realistic of where they are. Bangladesh were in that game against Sri Lanka and the West Indies, but not against England. I don't know, maybe it's not as disappointing as it looks, and maybe I'm ranking them too low here and they should be ahead of Namibia, but what is their best case scenario from here? Splitting one of the 2 games against Australia and South Africa? These aren't quite Bangladesh conditions, but outside of a home World Cup, this was about as similar as they were going to get to their home conditions. And no one thought they were going to win this tournament, but they should have at least been competing better, no? 0-3 it's a dick punch. This is still the slow scoring World Cup, and Bangladesh score slow and win. So you would expect something from them, but we've had kind of nothing from them. Scotland left the first round with some energy and a 3-0 record. Since then, they've been embarrassed by Afghanistan and almost stole a game that they probably didn't deserve to win against Namibia. The schedule is about to get a lot harder though. Scotland have dominated teams with their batting at associate level. Some of their batters even have county and franchise experience, and they even beat England in ODI with these batters. They haven't passed 120 in the second round yet. They will be gutted with that. I think their bowlers have completely stepped up. They struggled a little bit against Afghanistan, outside of Mark Watt, who, as my video showed earlier, has been absolutely extraordinary. But all tournament long, really, Wheel, Davies, Sharif and Greaves have stepped up. And to almost steal that game against Namibia was all down to their bowler. It's only going to get tougher for the Scottish bowlers from here. But so far in this tournament, I think they can be really proud of what they've done. If you disagree with any of the power rankings you've seen here and you want to put a comment in, please don't, because they're obviously all correct.